This video discusses sexual violence in media in a way that requires showing certain explicit scenes. While I'm going to try to keep that to a minimum and put warnings in front of the worst of it, and I'll provide plenty of eye bleach in the form of cute animals between all of that, be aware that some of what you're about to see may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. That's not the way that I wanted to lead into a discussion of Goblin Slayer. I'm pretty sure that content warning alone is going to invalidate my opinion for at least some of the show's biggest fans. First impressions are everything, and I wish that I could be making a different one. I also wish that Goblin Slayer didn't need to have a content warning in front of it on Crunchyroll. I wish that I could be making a video about fun, creative D&D kills, or the psychology of an obsessive anti-hero protagonist, or the potential for a resurgence of dark fantasy that this show, along with Overlord and ReZero, is facilitating. And yet, here we are. Because first impressions are everything, and for a lot of people, myself included, Goblin Slayer left an awful one. On watching the first episode, I said the series was repugnant and edgy and felt like it was written by a 14-year-old, and I regret that tweet. Having read the manga and light novel and seen a few more episodes, I think it's unfair to the work as a whole and to the series writer. Goblin Slayer is a fun, pulpy, schlocky adventure about a plate-armored psycho bending the rules of the RPG world he lives in to massacre trash mobs in the most imaginative, efficient, and often entertaining ways possible. It's a show that highlights the absurd creative potential of tabletop role-playing and marries it to the gleeful murder lust of games like Doom and Hitman. Overall, it's not repugnant. But its first episode is, and that largely comes down to one awful, ill-conceived, poorly justified, and exploitative rape scene that I think is as bad as, if not worse than, the infamously awful scene from the end of Sword Art's Fairy Dance arc. Today, I'm going to lay out the problems with that scene's concept and execution and dig into the issues with the anime adaptation that created them. And because I know that not everyone agrees that the scene is a problem in the first place, I'm also going to try to explain why I think it's detrimental to the series overall. So in case you don't know how Goblin Slayer starts, the series opens with a young priestess signing up to become an adventurer and joining a party of other newbies on a goblin killing quest as a healer. They go into the goblin's lair woefully unprepared and are quickly overwhelmed and then die, except for the priestess, who makes a swift retreat and is rescued by the titular hero Goblin Slayer at the last second, and the fighter, who is brutally beaten and raped. Because in this universe, that's how goblins reproduce. This is meant to show that goblins are dangerous and make us hate them as much as our heroes do. Or
they never said the goblins reproduce that way.
Well, it's implied.
I don't think they never implied it that. They just said that they're horrible creatures and they do that for their own pleasure. Actually,
no. Braden, they explain it later on in the show that yes, that's how they reproduce.
Okay, but not so far. Not even in the current amount of episodes. I just imagine
manga, though.
Some stuff happens with that girl who got
the grill.
That
good.
Stuff.
But I also just imagine
kind of gets mentioned later on in the show about what happened to her afterwards, and yeah, it's pretty fucked up.
Well, the thing is, I have a problem with why most people would have a problem with this, is because they literally have to prove to you how horrible these creatures are, and I don't know of another way they could have proved to you how horrible these creatures are.
It gives you a good understanding. It's
a quick, fast understanding to set it up and not have to drag on the plot line of it.
It's also one of the reasons why why the Goblin Slayer despises them and hates them so much.
There's also another rape scene where his sister gets raped. It's a common thing. That's just the thing the goblins do.
Yeah. This isn't the thing.
This
about
isn't
the
a show
Goblin
for
Slayer,
little kids or whatever that are want happy-go-lucky things.
The world is that it takes the isekai and the D&D world of let's go on an adventure and have a fun time,
and it shows you just how awful it can be.
Yeah, if that was if this was a real thing, then yeah, lots of newbies would get fucking murdered constantly.
I can see why people wouldn't like it, but it also it's not that.
This show was literally tailored to people who like Doom right off the bat from like the whole title and the description of it. So people should have known from the second when they read what it was that this is what they were signing up for.
And then the warning.
The warning is there because every episode he literally there's so much blood that sprays across screen when he murders everything. I can understand why that's there. There's enough gore in every episode that it makes sense. Even that newest episode when they didn't focus on Goblin Slayer, they still literally clubbed those insects to death, and they still bled like humans or whatever, red blood and stuff.
Yeah.
So, just the animating him clubbing something to death, I can understand why they'd put a warning in front of that.
Mm-hmm.
Understand why they need to be killed so badly. And it arguably does that, but the way it goes about doing it is cheap and exploitative. The scene makes us as an audience feel upset, but it doesn't do so by hurting a character that it's made us care about, or cutting off a potentially interesting and fun storyline before it can begin, or doing any of the other things that well-written stories do to earn their readers' reactions. All it does is take something from the real world that is already inherently upsetting and put it in front of us, saying,
"Okay, I
look at
understand
this,
what he's saying here.
Feel bad." Yeah. And it doesn't even do a good job of that, but I'm getting ahead of myself. That is, to put it nicely, really fucking lazy. It's the writing equivalent of a jump scare, or of focusing the camera on a puddle of gore, a cheap tactic for getting a totally unearned reaction out of your audience. And while using shortcuts to move people early in a story when they're not inherently invested isn't a bad thing on its own, specifically using sexual violence, which is both a hot button issue and a source of trauma.
Here comes something bad. He's got the animals.
At best, crass.
Yep, it's the worst.
Because, frankly, there are plenty of other horrible real-world things that could elicit the same reaction without that baggage. If the goblins were to, say, shove their knives in a box of puppies, or stick their dicks in a box of puppies, we'd be equally disgusted with them, equally
That's a lot harder to put into a show,
and it would
though.
have just as much of an impact
in a cave.
on the rest of the story as killing off and traumatizing a
See, I bet he does not explain what could have been done, like, in a very deep example.
In a story, especially
because I almost guarantee there is no good way anyone else could come up with a way to do it, too.
It's an essential component of that story.
He's like, yeah, just spend a whole episode not on Goblin Slayer and focus on them so that we like them and then kill them.
Something meaningful
like, yeah, but that's
what I will say.
I would have not cared at all about the show then.
Of how this can be done.
Wait, I will say this real quick about Goblin Slayer. So in the actual mangas and in the light novels, they do actually give pretty strong backstories for all three of the other characters.
Yeah, but it's a manga, and you can read through that at any pace. You could skip that part.
What I think would have been interesting to make us care more about it, so it's just to be like despise the goblins even more, is like the first two episodes is all about that. The third episode is about them meeting the priestess and doing all that, and everything happening to them, which really makes you go, holy fuck.
But so far from the show, it seems like they've already had enough things shoved into the few episodes they have.
Villain kidnaps a woman named Chika Shimizu and starts doing every horrible thing he's ever imagined doing to her because the Sybil system has flagged him as a latent criminal and he figures his life is over anyway.
Also, Goblin Slayer only has 13 episodes, and it already doesn't seem like it had that high of a budget.
Chika, she's so traumatized and stressed out from what she's just been through that the Sybil system picks up on her mental instability and deems her a latent criminal as well. Meaning, right after they save her, the officers have to kill or at least arrest her. This whole plotline is meant to highlight the horrifying flaws in the Sybil system, how it encourages criminal activity and makes no effort to distinguish between unstable criminals and traumatized victims. And that message is amplified by showing Chika going through one of the worst kinds of trauma imaginable, making us entirely sympathetic to her plight. Threatening a box of puppies or even subjecting Chika to a lesser crime would change the outcome and meaning of the story. So I think that using sexual assault as a plot point there is justified in a way that Goblin Slayer's use of it simply
But that whole show was also about horrible crimes.
Not in the anime.
Not about a dude playing goblins.
The light novel and the manga turn
because the goblins are literally not that big of an example. He's comparing
actual, characters.
That show is focus a lot on the killer person, so obviously you get to see a lot of their victim. This show is supposed to focus on Goblin Slayer, not the goblins.
Yeah.
So we can't spend that large of a time on the
focusing on why the goblins are bad. We just have to immediately be.
We need a
goblins
quick
are bad
thing to kill the goblins. Because you just can't waste that much time. They already didn't look like they had a budget.
3 episodes on goblins doing goblin things.
Yeah, and also if you look at it, it doesn't look like it has that high of a budget. So they really didn't have time to waste. They really need to get you in fast and make sure you know what you're watching.
Yeah.
It's great to say they did it. It's great to say they did it wrong, but it's also, you can't come up with an example of how to fix it. And also, where are you going to give them the money to animate 2 more episodes to do that?
of avoiding one scene that you don't like.
Yeah. Because I can almost guarantee nobody's going to give them money, especially if they had not seen anything in the show and the company just went, hey, we need more money to not make this one thing. Mm-hmm. It's like...
This one scene, we don't think everyone's going to like it. Some people will. Most people won't care. A few people will really dislike it, and it'll turn them off of it. If we could circumvent this,
we need 40 grand.
We need 2 more episodes.
We need 40 grand to make those 2 episodes. Pay all the animators and voice actors and stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like that's just not how it works. Business comes into this in a way, and that's probably part of it.
The narration shifts to their perspective, giving us a bit of insight into who they are and how
I think they did the best with what they had.
The mage is annoyed by Priestess's constant worrying, for instance, while the fighter is in love with the warrior and finds herself heartbroken to watch him die. In the manga, each of them is given a one-page flashback where we learn that the warrior was a poor
one-page
flashback.
Okay, that's like 10 seconds of flashback.
The mage was a spellcasting prodigy destined for great things, and the fighter was the daughter of a martial arts master who wanted to honor her father's legacy by saving people. It's as thin as characterization gets, but it's still characterization. It tells us who these characters are.
The whole point was these people are just regular people.
In a different world with less rapey goblins, these characters could have been proper heroes in their own right. The warrior could have been Dragon Quest's Erdrick. But in this bleak world, that story is cut short before it could ever begin. This small bit of character building adds a tragic element that's not there in the anime and makes this scene upsetting for reasons other than just because the goblins did an inherently bad
I do say they could have given them
Kumo
like
Kagyu,
5 minutes of characterization.
Yeah, but also they did kind of fill that whole first episode with a lot of stuff too.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they would have squeezed that more in unless they pushed it. And then I wouldn't want to say until the show's over now how much you would want to push that, because it seems like they're going at a pretty decent pace for other stuff. Mm-hmm. That I think there's a lot of things they're pushing in, and it might actually be that they really like this show and that they're trying to put so much into it because they don't know if they're going to get another season, so they're trying to fill as much of it in.
Yeah, they really like the manga, so they're making the anime as close as they can, but they only have 13 episodes to do so. So they're like, we don't know if we're going to get another season. We don't know if we can get more episodes, so we're going to put as much as we can right now.
Because we like the craft, and we want this. Yeah. We want as much as we can to give to other people so that they can enjoy it.
Yeah. Hopefully, people like this enough that are I don't know what you would call them.
Fans or whatever? Or investors?
The investors or whoever pays them to do it will pay them enough for another season.
Hopefully.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just gain a fan base around the manga.
And it's better than the nothing the anime gives us. Now, this level of characterization doesn't really justify how gratuitous the anime or manga are, but it's perfectly appropriate for the way the novel handles the scene. Which leads us to the bigger problem with the anime, the way that it sexualizes this violence, treating what's supposed to be a traumatic, scary moment as dimly lit fan service, and undermining its own message in the process. Now, whether or not something is sexualized is, to some extent, a subjective question, one that requires making assumptions about both a work's author and its intended audience. For example, all of these shots of feet seem pretty innocuous and innocent until you realize they're all from Quentin Tarantino films, and Tarantino is a notorious, soul man, so to speak. Sorry if I just ruined Pulp Fiction for you, and if I made it better, I guess you're welcome. This subjective element means that any argument I make about Goblin Slayer's intent can be countered with, well, it's supposed to be horrifying, I don't see it as sexual, and if you do, that says more about what you're into than the show. So instead of that, I'm just going to focus on how the scene is shot and presented. Now, if I was talking about the manga, I don't think anyone in their right mind would argue that this panel from the same scene isn't sexualized. Fighter is impossibly contorting her spine in order to present both her ass and titties to the reader simultaneously. This was drawn into this supposedly
they're probably trying to get as many people as they can
explicitly for the purpose of fan service. It's the
people
definition of exploitative and a major black mark on a manga
so why would they not just
that has otherwise
flare it up a little bit to get you for that part too?
Nothing in the anime so far has been anywhere near this overt, at least nothing that wasn't supposed to be fan service, which is good, but there are a lot of questionable choices in how this scene in particular is shot and animated. And this is where I've got to actually break down the scenes, so if you're about it, you can either look away from the screen for a bit or skip to this timestamp if you don't feel like you need the explanation. There are two shots in this sequence that I think send the wrong message and dilute the intent of this scene, assuming that the intent is, in fact, to disturb the audience and make us fear and hate the goblins. These shots leave way too little to the imagination to actually be frightening, which is a problem a lot of horror anime have, and they show a lot of skin in a way that's more provocative than it is disturbing.
The dog's just to make this
shot
worse.
of the goblins.
Yeah, I was gonna say, honestly.
Clothes. Obviously,
it makes
if you're
it
going
weirder
to show this kind of thing on screen, some amount of nudity is inevitable, but this is excessive in a way that frankly doesn't make much sense. These vicious little monsters are supposed to be aggressively dogpiling her, yet none of them are actually on top of her or even directly touching her. They're all tearing her clothes off from way off to the side, giving her a weird amount of personal space. This guy is a full 2 feet away from her. They're not really acting the way that you'd expect chaotic evil rape parasites.
I'm being nitpicky, but did he pixel measure that? Does he know?
I don't think it was
I'm
2
pretty
foot.
sure it sounds like
to
he
serve
is.
a purpose or augment its meaning.
To be honest,
Blocking helps directors to direct the viewer's
that's the
eyes
whole thing
around
of his
the
argument
screen or
right now, is
stage,
really
and by
nitpicking it.
looking at a director's blocking choices, we can surmise a lot about the thought process behind a given scene or shot and what they want us to pay attention to. So, to come back to this shot, note how the blocking of these goblins conveniently makes it so
Also, I like how he's comparing. He's like, but it's sexualized. It's like, dude, all the people watching anime sexualize everything.
There's literally
Animes
an
that are
entire
just that.
subset of people with lollies.
There's harem animes are made that way because they were just invented because they are the greatest way to get the biggest audience. Because you could have as many girls as you wanted that are all different and there at the same time. So the most people would watch it. So obviously, they probably were like, from the manga, the person who wrote it probably also was like, hey, we're going to still sexualize it. And then we also get the people that like that.
And also, he's like, yeah, the manga is bad, but the manga was good. And then it's just like,
the same thing.
The anime is bad because they did it. It's like, but the manga did it. Actually, no, I think he said the novel was good. And the novel can't do that because it's a novel with no pictures. So.
They just use words.
Yeah.
But yes, the manga did it, and the anime is based on the manga.
And then the novel's also based on the manga.
It also seemed like the manga sexualized it even more from just that one picture than the show did.
That's what he said. He said that.
But yeah, he's still nitpicking
he said the manga and the anime did badly, but the novel did good. So it
wasn't the novel usually rewritten by somebody else or something, or written for American audiences usually?
I have no idea.
Because I think usually Japan has manga, and then we get novels or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so maybe, because they Americanized it, they're like, yeah, maybe we shouldn't sell rape to like the Americans. They don't usually like that as much.
No, it's still in there. It's just not sexualized because there's no pictures.
Yeah.
And if you did, then it would be exceedingly creepy in words.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know how you would explain that.
Never lose sight of Fighter's face, which means that we see the horror on it, but we also never lose sight of her thighs, her butt when she flips over, or her breasts. This other goblin is actively crouching down specifically so that the camera can always see her boobs.
It just seems like such an extreme amount of
nitpicking.
nitpicking.
Head. He even awkwardly
you could
rips
nitpick
her
this in every
clothes
anime.
away from himself when she
Why
turns
is the
in
guy
order
that's
to
raping
keep a
this
thin
character
strip of
also
cloth
ripping the
over
clothes
her
off from
crotch
2 feet?
so that the show
Because it's
can
also a
show
fantasy in
more
that
skin
anime
without
too.
delving into the realm of hentai. He's so considerate.
Wait, so wait,
This is,
hold
to
pause
be
it.
Frank, the kind
He
of blocking
nitpicked
you'd expect
that
to see.
he was not blocking the breasts, but then he ripped it so that it was blocking her crotch. It's like, okay, are they showing too much or are they not showing enough? What are you talking? What? You're like, he's not blocking it, but then he's blocking this. So, what?
Kitten.
Yeah, kitten. I mean, hey.
I don't like
hentai,
the
not
animals.
a horror movie. And I know because I watch a lot of horror movies. And even more hentai. The only thing that the director should be cheating toward the camera here is her face so that the audience can better empathize with her. Everything else is gratuitous. The same applies to the shot where she's pressed down on the ground in the face down, ass up position. There's no good reason for the goblins to all be standing off to the side, framing her entire naked body and the curve
I feel like
of
this
her
guy
back
doesn't
for the
understand
camera.
hentai, even though he
But they
watches
are
tons of anime.
having them all crowded together in an orderly
knows the
fashion
community, it
actively
seems like,
takes
pretty
away
well.
from the impression that these monsters are swarming around her, because for some reason, whoever storyboarded this scene thought that it was really important we have an unobstructed view of her backside as the goblin tears her panties off. The camera pans away from that to better show off her butt and the face of the goblin behind her, but as it's the only light-colored object in the frame, her ass is the most eye-catching thing on the screen here by far. That's kinda filmmaking 101, and I would be genuinely surprised if a professional animator did that unintentionally. Take that first shot out, and take the pan out of the second one, and suddenly the scene is a lot more unambiguously frightening. The shots of Fighter's head being stepped on and the goblin's fingers tearing into her skin tell the story of what's happening effectively enough on their own, and absent the context of those two hentai angles, they actually feel more creepy and disorienting. Now, I do think there's more that could be done to increase the horror factor here, like having the goblins swarm more violently and chaotically and using more creative angles, but I'm not going to turn this into a whole
animators to draw more goblins.
I thought he just said he didn't like the rape scene. Now he wants them to draw more.
This right here is bad.
Draw more.
In part because it's
bad, draw more.
And excessive. In part because it's exploitative.
No, he doesn't like those two.
But
like,
mostly because
he doesn't like those like 4 seconds
of the scene
of
and makes
the
it
scene.
less
fan servicing to the people that like
it. It could be
it.
so much more effective without these shots in it. And not to sound like a broken record, but the original light novel doesn't have this problem. There's no explicit description of Fighter's body.
Instantly went to the
It says enough that you know what's happening, but
it's not. Oh no, it's not
leaves the
saying
details to your imagination.
It's not freaking whatever it's called, 50 Shades of Grey. Oh boy, wasn't expecting that.
Even after that breakdown, I'm sure this scene doesn't bother some of you. Maybe it even works as intended, and look, we can argue back and forth over whether or not it serves a legitimate narrative purpose.
If it had pictures, it'd probably have a picture of it, and then he'd have an issue with it, but it's not a picture novel.
If you're a Goblin Slayer fan and you disagree, that's okay. You're not a rape apologist, a hypocrite, or an edgelord, and unless
I do like
you're
that he's
typing
not hating on
threatening or
people.
abusive comment right now, you're probably not an asshole. Anyone who makes that kind of judgment based on the anime that you like needs to get their head out of their asses. That said, there is still a reason that even you, as a person who really loves Goblin Slayer and just wants to see it build up a huge fandom, as someone who's upset to see me make a video that might discourage my audience from getting into it, should still be concerned about the presentation of this scene. Because it's not just a matter of taste or
Guys, it's going to affect everyone.
It's a
Everyone's
matter
going to start
of
raping
accessibility. Now. The way Goblin Slayer handles sexual assault has already made a huge chunk of people decide not to watch it. And while some are simply offended by the content and presentation,
hold on, I really want to see if he compares this to the allow.
A perfectly valid reason to dislike a show, others have a bigger problem. PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, is a medical condition that can cause victims to suffer anxiety attacks or emotional breakdowns when reminded of traumatic events. Depictions of similar events in film, in particular, since the inclusion of sound and motion makes it much more vivid and intense, have a higher chance of triggering these reactions.
So he pretty much said, I don't like that there's a warning on this show, but then he's like...
No, he doesn't like that there has to be a warning.
Mm-hmm.
So he's like, get rid of all those things. Stop it.
Yeah, get rid of the things. And then make it so that it doesn't have to be like this.
But it has the warning because there's just blood in it. Most of the episodes don't have a rape; they have blood.
I think that they have it on every episode, just in case. Yeah. They don't go through each episode in particular.
But also, each episode is so much more blood than I've ever seen in any other anime. I could just imagine it just because of the blood in those scenes too.
Mm-hmm.
Because most other animes, you don't get like any blood. In this one, you get blood oozing out of things and like beating the hell out of something and seeing the blood come out of it.
Yeah.
So like.
About 5% of adults in America suffer from PTSD, and alongside military experience and car accidents, sexual assault is one of the leading causes. So a significant number of people cannot sit through episode 1 of Goblin Slayer.
Like 4% of the population can't watch Goblin Slayer? Fuck, we gotta change it.
The show in its entirety is effectively unwatchable for them, and that sucks. Especially because
you don't need episode 1 to watch it.
Skip it.
There's not very much in it.
First place. It's not there in the novel, and it doesn't have to be there. Or
it is there in the novel. It would be just about as bad as the novel.
Few people call episode 1's rape scene a normie filter.
Also, technically, the novel could be worse to some people because then you have to imagine it.
Yeah, and you have
Which
to
could
sit
bring
there and
back
imagine
the
it, and then you
PTSD
could
even
put
worse.
yourself into the position, yeah. And
So-
the novel and the manga is just about the same, but he's like, it's worse in film. It's like, yeah, it is worse in film. And then you say, yeah, the novel did it, but no, it didn't. It's not film. It doesn't have the same issue.
I also like that he's like,
like, it's
but
a
guys,
film."
listen, we can't have that rape scene because like almost up to 5% of the population could suffer from PTSD and seeing that.
No, 5% max.
That's 5% max. I was just giving it all the max just because it's like, well, yeah, but we don't make every show that's like, I want 100% of the population to watch my show, and I better be so careful with everything that I animate that everyone can watch it.
It'd be a gray screen, but then people that don't like gray will be angry.
And then it shifts colors, and then people don't like it because that one color showed up, and then you can't make everything for everyone. I feel like
red to be a color of hate and anger.
I would imagine a guy that's channel is literally about reviewing anime should be able to understand you can't make something for everybody. Even harem animes that try their hardest aren't for everyone. So you can't make everything for anyone.
So now he's going on to the whole, it's a gate. If you don't like the scene, then you can leave. We don't want you.
I really don't like it now because it's the inclusive bullshit that I hate to hear. Where it's like, but we gotta include everybody. What if
you trigger someone?
What if you got raped by a butterfly, and then that butterfly scene where at the farm? What if your uncle owned a farm and he died, and then they're at a farm, and then I can't watch this anime now?
What if all your friends died in a cave and they completely removed the rape scene and all your friends died and now you're sad?
What if you had a cart? What if your uncle had a cart and he got run over by it? And
What if
she carries a cart and I can't watch it now?
Okay, this is going to be a bit mean, but what if you sexually identify as a goblin? Then all the murder of the goblins. What about that?
Exactly.
That's a bit mean, but whatever.
It's
Let's
mean.
continue.
I feel like we're mean, but also it's just to prove a point that you can't be all inclusive for everything. You can't just. It's just possible.
Can't handle it, but many people, sometimes those same people, also jump to point out that Goblin Slayer isn't really about rape. It's about goofy D&D antics with high stakes, intense violence, and a dark edge. It's Doom meets Batman meets Tolkien. And while that's definitely
a dark
not
edge.
for
When did
everyone,
Batman
there
just
is
explain
enough
why
Batman
it's there?
of Goblin Slayer's core appeal
I
as
just thought
a
it was
series
Doom with
that
goblins
should
for
require
D&D.
someone be able to stomach graphic depictions of sexual violence.
He said with a dark edge. Yeah,
So
the dark edge
why is that the
including
first
that.
thing a new viewer needs to get past in order to watch?
Because
the
it's a
show?
dark edge.
Maybe
You
that
just said
doesn't
it.
bother you. Maybe you could care less if anyone else enjoys the series.
This
Maybe
is
you
why I
think
don't
it's
like
a
Mother's
good thing
Basement.
that some people can't, and you don't want to share your fandom with
I've
people
liked
who
most of
don't
his things,
share
but
your
now he
values.
just went all
I'm not going to
inclusive
pretend
bullshit
I
on me.
understand that mindset, but it is. What
Also,
it
they
is.
had that part in the
said,
episode.
If you do think that
My
way,
friend was stabbed to death
maybe
in
stop
Iraq
going
or
on
whatever. I
Twitter
can't watch it
tirades
now.
against people who criticize the show because
That's pretty
they're
mean.
kind of doing both you and the people you don't want to watch the show a favor. But for the rest of you out there, the hardcore Goblin Slayer fans who just want to see the community around the series grow, want it to be recognized for its better qualities, and want it to make a lot of money so that more of the
Yeah,
series
it's better
gets
qualities,
adapted and more
everything
shows like it
except
get
for its
made,
CG.
please don't let defending this one scene be the hill that you
You know what I
die
also
on.
like? He didn't point
Instead
out
of
the rape in
acting
episode
like
3 either.
nothing's wrong with it, or like people are wrong
is he okay
talking
with that one?
about
there's
it,
stuff wrong with it.
acknowledge that it's
It's
a
just
bad first
you-
episode.
you
or at
can't
least a
really
potentially
fix
offensive
it
one,
if
and
you-
try to draw
if you
people's
are gonna
attention
give
to the
them
parts of the series
enough
that you
money
think
for
they'll
2
actually
episodes.
like the creative kills, the lore, the endearing moments where someone's just having a random conversation and Gobslay-san pops up like, did someone say goblins?
Maybe they have all those scenes you like because they had the money from making that quick rape scene and not spending 2 episodes doing that to make all these fun things over the next
Yeah,
few
they would have had to
episodes.
either cut out half of the stuff, or like I don't know. There's 13 episodes. 1/13 of each episode, or 2/13 of each episode. They'd have
Yeah.
to cut that out of the episode to make those 2 episodes, so that it's not that one scene, the 4 seconds of the scene that you don't like.
Yeah.
So you can't enjoy, you know, all
My
the
friends
the
should
whole
check out
money
the novel
to-
instead of the anime.
Whatever. It's money for enjoyment. You may have to sacrifice a bit of enjoyment so that you can get more of it in the long run.
It's an
Yeah.
investment.
I actually highly recommend that. It's a really good read, and the anime's got other problems, like horribly out-of-place CGI, that the novel doesn't suffer from.
The
Or
CGI,
if you know that they'd still rather watch something than read something,
like we said,
tell
they
them
don't
to
have
skip
money.
the first episode, because
If you look
there's
back
not
at, like,
really
old
much in it
Berserk.
that isn't reiterated in a more effective and tasteful way by episode 4. And on top of that, be
Or
understanding
Overlord.
that some people still won't want to give it a chance. One bad scene or episode shouldn't define an otherwise good anime, but for
Yes.
some people, it will. Think of it
Yeah,
this way.
sadly.
Imagine your favorite video essay of mine, or
Why do you
if you
put a
don't like my channel,
VHS
your favorite
edit
video
on it?
essay.
Oh, that's 'cause that's his old
Now
video.
imagine that video essay is exactly the same in every single way, but I started it by saying, "What's up, my N-words," with like a hard R. Understandably, some people would be really upset about that and not able to see past it to enjoy the rest of what is otherwise a good video. And that is a fine position to take. Everyone has a line that they don't want media to cross.
That's a little. I think that's a little different. It's a little bit different of a comparison. Also, if you just wanted to mathematical it out, that would be like blocking 20 to 50% of the. I don't know how many black people are in America or wherever.
I
But
don't
it'd be a
think
way
they'd be
higher
that angry.
margin than the people that are scared of the PTSD from rape. So still, technically, if we are just thinking mathematically, going with the rape scene would be better. If we had to, which is how
Yeah, but
economics
also,
usually
but
work.
also, Braden, you got to think about the percentage of people that are like him, and don't like the scene just because.
Just because. There's plenty of animes
Because,
I like
because
just...
they're offended for other people that haven't seen it yet.
I'm sure there's plenty of people that didn't want to watch this show because of the CG, and I'm like, that's fine. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But then getting a problem with how they made one scene in the show, that really bugs me.
And
It's
the
like,
best part is
I
he
like
only-
this show, but I hate this one scene, but I like the rest.
He really only dislikes like 4 seconds of it. He went into the scene,
And then he had to make a whole
talked about
20-minute
the scene,
video talking
and
about...
then he re-edited the scene, and it was 4 seconds less ish. I don't know how long it was exactly.
It's
But-
like less than 10 seconds, I know for a fact what he
He's like,
cut
this
out.
one's so much better, and I'm like, okay, good.
Good. Just like all those re-edits of movies, like the new Star Wars or different movies. I'm sure you can re-edit a lot of things out of them that make them look better.
Yeah.
That's just not what happened.
You could re-edit everything out of the new Star Wars movie and make
Also,
it just
you're one
crap.
guy working for free or whatever at your house making money, and this was a company that had to do it fast and had to make money and had to put it out. And had to
You
animate
had
it.
such a low budget that you couldn't do CGI except for the insanely low quality that it is.
Exactly.
And it is perfectly legitimate to draw that line here. There is no need to hurl abuse at people who don't like the show, and no need for them to hurl it back at people who do. I know that was a lot of talking to ultimately land on. Sometimes you just got to agree to disagree, but hopefully I've managed to strip away some of the hyperbole, including what I myself have perpetuated around this series, and helped some of you to understand what all the fuss is about. And for anyone watching this who's part of the fuss, because I'm pretty sure half of this video's views will come from me preaching to the choir, maybe give the series a second chance, especially if you enjoy tabletop role-playing or dark fantasy. I did, and once I got past the repugnant stuff, I had a good time watching it. And hopefully, I'll be able to have a good time making a less serious video about the series before the season is over. But there's a lot of other great anime still left to talk about, so let me know in the comments below.
See, I like that. I don't understand that if the people who are like, I can't watch the show because this rape scene, you signed up for a dark show. And then you got what you were looking for,
What,
and
were
then
you
you're
just
like, I can't
expecting
watch
a lot
it.
of murder.
You're like, I can't watch it.
But if you want a lot of murder, go I don't know, Overlord. That
don't
has
even
a
that
lot of
one has
murder,
that
but
much.
it's just inconsequential murder.
Yeah,
Just killing 100,000 people or whatever.
dead.
They're dead now.
And even that show didn't have that good of a budget or whatever. So we obviously see these shows don't have a very good budget. This
Actually,
media-
one thing that I saw, people didn't like Overlord because they cut away from every fight scene. Something I didn't really notice, but going back and realizing that they didn't have enough budget for fight scenes in that show.
that means they really had no money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then that makes me appreciate it more because then the people working on it were like, we gotta do what we gotta do or whatever. We're gonna do the best of what we can. So all I would have to say for the end of this is no hate to all the others, but I don't, unless you had hard proof of how to fix it and the budget to come up with it and a whole plan.
Yeah, the thing is it's too late to fix it now. Yeah, it's an issue.
I don't think it was ever a thing they could have fixed anyway because of just thinking about how much it would have cost. And rewriting it, they would have to rewrite it from something different than the manga.
Yeah, the only way for them to do it would be to start a fundraiser before it even exists. People don't care about it, and it earns no money.
Also,
so there's no way to fix it.
I think this is English transition to Japan. I mean, the Japanese to English version is what's coming out for us. So it already aired in, I think, Japan earlier. Is that how they work, Cameron? Is that how the AnyChart stuff works? Is it already out in Japan when we start seeing it, or do we get it at the same time as they do?
We get it about as
sure.
fast as I think it's a bit slower because of translating,
Right.
but it's not that slow. I don't think. I think
And
it's
I don't
maybe like
imagine
2
they
days.
cared so much or whatever. Hell, they're probably jerking off to the scenes, whatever, right now. Plus, obviously, it's for that audience probably more than us, because if you know anything about the economy of animating, most things that make it good in America don't really get new seasons because it's based on people spending money in Japan. And stuff like Crunchyroll, I don't think really give that much money over to them. And stuff like that, So it's more based on them anyway. So if they probably were more okay with the rape scene in it like that, and it probably might earn the show more money on where it actually needs to make money because of that.
Yeah.
So if that, I'm okay with that, because then if it gets another season because of the money it made from that, I'm all good. Good in the hood.